Hi everyone. We are now going to talk about how to provide helpful and inclusive feedback. This is probably one of the most important skills that you will develop as a mentor. And we don't have any expectations that anyone is going to be able to walk into MedWork and be the perfect mentor right from the get-go. So we're going to provide you some tips that you can work on while you're being a mentor to these wonderful mentees. Feedback at so many levels is the central tenet of a mentoring relationship. Of course, it is important to be professional. It is important to be appropriate. It's important to help your mentees establish goals and whatnot. But all of that really hinges on your ability to provide feedback. You're not going to be perfect at this when we get started, but you will get better as you go along. So we want you to get started off on the right foot. So this is an abbreviated presentation of a program that I developed with my colleague, Dr. Jill Weber, and presented on another occasion with my colleague, Dr. Caitlin Neary. If you look here at the bottom right-hand corner, there is a workshop handout for the full workshop if you're interested in learning more about that. And you are more than welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to take you through the full version of what I'm going to present for you today. So let's start with the feedback process. Typically what happens is that there's some sort of obstacle that your mentee, or maybe even you, but your mentee wants to go over or go around. You are going to help them provide some strategies, and everything's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful, and you're going to have complete success. But as you know, that's very ideal. That's not necessarily going to happen. In the real world, we have to realize this next concept. Feedback is collaborative. It is an opportunity for you to work with your mentee and not only provide feedback, which is really the most important part of this relationship that you're going to form, but also to receive feedback, because they're going to have feedback for you. And being collaborative in that space is always going to result in something bigger and better than what either of you could have done on your own. Certainly for your mentee, the whole point of why they are in this program is to receive feedback and mentoring with you as they want to improve in whatever they want to accomplish. So the most essential aspect of the feedback process is establishing a safe space. That is paramount. And a safe space I define as a space in which people feel comfortable to express their thoughts and feelings. That, you might have heard the phrase, okay, this is safe. What's said here stays here. I mean, that's another way of thinking about what this space is like. So how do you establish that safe space? Well, there's some other strategies that we talked about in other training videos, but in some, just get to know your mentee. Allow them to get to know you. Be professional about it. You don't want to super share necessarily, but maybe over time that relationship will develop and will become safer as you go along. There is no question that when you first start out, you're going to be trying to figure out where you're both coming from in that space. So anyway, we want the space to be a safe place to express thoughts and feelings bi-directionally. Again, this is a collaborative space. We know that establishing a feeling of safety in a space can take time, but it can always be extended to mentees. You are the mentor. You're the one that is going to establish this space, and so you have the liberty to do so. Sharing your identity with them is often a way that I like to use to establish that safe space. I like to let people know who I am with things that I'm comfortable with sharing, and that tends to open up conversations and help the mentee feel comfortable. With youth, again, it's going to take some time. It may take several sessions for that to actually happen, but it will eventually. You can look again here at the little bit more detailed presentation. This is the workbook, and here's the QR code that you can see. So I want to start with understanding how feedback is perceived. And we have to recognize that our perceptions are influenced by known or conscious factors such as our past experiences, our expectations, uh, our experiences, whether conscious or unconscious, believe it or not. Um, and those unconscious impressions or factors that influence how we perceive something, those are called implicit biases. We all have them, and we should recognize that we have them, and it's okay to have implicit biases. The thing about implicit biases, though, is what it means is that we all look at the world through a different pair of glasses, as you can see here, right? So our implicit biases can influence, if you want to think of a positive word, or warp, if you want to think of a negative word. But either way, they influence our experiences, our expectations, our observations, how we actually select and use and interpret data, our beliefs, our assumptions. They can result in cognitive distortions. All of these are biases that we have to keep in mind as we are looking at the world and as we're looking at our mentee. So we have to be conscious of this in any relationship, but especially a mentoring relationship. So one of the conceptual frameworks that I like to use in thinking about our implicit biases and how that factors into how we can give feedback is was set forth by Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, you may have heard of this book in the context of thinking of a System 1 and System 2, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it is essential, at least in my opinion, on how we think about how people respond to the words or the actions that are presented before them. So let's talk about this just in brief. So Kahneman said that the psychological brain operates in two different systems. System 1 is fast, System 2 is slow, System 1 is unconscious, whereas System 2 is conscious. System 1 is dealing with everyday decisions, automatic decisions, if you will, whereas System 2 works with complex decisions that take some thought. Therefore, because System 1 is automatic, it tends to be error prone. And System 2 tends to be reliable, even though it takes a little bit more effort to get at, to complete your thoughts and your plans. System 1 is automatic, as I mentioned before, which means System 2 does take effort. Okay, so how does that have anything to do with feedback? Well, there are some economists that have been thinking about this in a different space. So let's talk about the human operating system. All right, so an essential aspect of the feedback process is being a good listener. Now, keep in mind that whenever you are interacting with a person, they are either going to be in System 1, sort of automatic, reactive, they're just trying to survive, or they're in System 2. They are they are thoughtful. They're putting some effort towards learning something. They're ready to be influenced in whatever space that you have set up. The other thing you have to keep in mind is people can train their System 1. They can train their automatic reactions by engaging in System 2. So being an active listener on what your mentee has to say is essential for helping train their System 2 or facilitate their System 2 to train their System 1 to exhibit good behaviors and thoughts. So many times mentees just need someone to hear them, to acknowledge them, share an experience. A good rule of thumb that I like to think about is that especially when in this program, you might not need to give feedback until feedback is requested. Because when feedback is requested, that means your mentee is ready to receive it. The other way to think about this is that no one wants to receive unsolicited advice. So you might have feedback for your mentee, but I would, before you start, going off on that, I would ask them, would you be open to feedback on this to be able to improve on that? Um, Definitely ask. Sometimes they might actually be waiting for you to say something because of their body language. You will get to know your mentees in a way that is helpful. So, how do you give feedback? Let's talk about that human operating system. So, this was proposed by some economists, by Martin, and they propose that there are two basic governing values. Let's talk about Model 1. Model 1's governing value, which is very similar to a System 1 mode of thinking, is that people come into a space, particularly if it's a feedback space or really any space, could be any learning space, where they want to win and not lose. So in other words, they're very defensive. They want to make sure that they are going to benefit from whatever is happening in that space. So they will do anything to maintain control. They will do anything to avoid embarrassment. They will do anything to always appear rational. You can see that this is a very reactive type of mindset. In this mindset, someone is really just thinking about themselves and how they can get by from this point. Let's talk about Model 2. So Model 2's governing values, which is very much akin to a System 2 mode of thinking, somebody who's open to the influence of someone else, is that we win together. I might not have all the data, but it's okay to be wrong and to discover it. And together, we are going to be smarter. And somebody who is in a Model 2 governing value is willing to be influenced by other people. We want this Model 2 governing value to be present in your mentoring space. Again, that means you have to set up a safe and inclusive environment. That means you need to be aware of your own implicit biases. And that means you need to be aware of how you can help your mentee be in a System 2 mindset, one that is willing to work with new ideas and not be so reactive. Keep in mind that people will bounce between System 1 and System 2 all the time. And it is definitely an art form and a skill to be able to recognize when that is happening. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because essentially when someone walks into a feedback space, you can probably relate to this. When I hear, oh, I'm going to receive feedback, the automatic reaction is, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, or am I in trouble, or what's that person going to say to me? And so the dominant frame that most people have is a Model 1 governing value. They are in System 1 mode of thinking. And so they are going to be very defensive. Our job as mentors is to help them transition from the Model 1 or System 1 mode of thinking to an adjusting frame where they're willing to work and be influenced by other people. That is the skill and the art of giving feedback. So you can probably relate that all too often feedback conversations turn into adversarial or defensive conversations. That's the exact opposite of what you want to accomplish. We're going to talk about some obstacles to productive feedback, and we're going to talk about ways in which to overcome those obstacles. From this slide, I think the most important aspect you should realize is that people never want to be placed in a situation where they feel like they're losing or embarrassed. Once you reach that point, if you reach that point, I would stop everything that's going on and regroup and try to reestablish a System 2 mode of thinking and a Model 2 governing values space. All right, so let's talk about obstacles that that may influence how feedback is received or even given. So the first is truth. Someone who is defensive about the feedback that they're receiving may not actually believe the data of what's happening. Remember that everyone looks at situations through their own set of filtered glasses, and believing the data is a difficult thing for some people. It could be a relationship. The mentee may not even trust you, which is why we've talked time and time again that establishing trust is super important to what you do in your work here in MedWork. The last obstacle, which is the most difficult thing to work with, is the mentee's own identity and how they perceive themselves. For example, imposter syndrome is really difficult to work with. Even in the regular teaching space in the classroom, if a student has imposter syndrome about their ability to learn, they're going to have a hard time learning. And so working with students in that context, a lot of the work I do is just helping them realize how valuable they are and establishing their identity so they can establish a growth mindset. And then they can typically believe the data from there, and they can trust in the relationships that people want to help them and not be adversaries to them. So let's talk about the first set of tools that can help your mentee get over the truth barrier to receiving feedback. So the tools are giving appreciation, providing coaching, in other words, focusing on skills, and then providing fair evaluations. I cannot emphasize fair evaluation. An evaluation can include a formative assessment. It can include a summative assessment if we're talking about the classroom. In the mentoring environment, it could be an honest evaluation of the student's progress or performance, but be fair and be positive. So when you can use all three of these tools, and again, you can go to the workbook to get more details on them, but when you help your mentee feel appreciated, feel like that they can trust you with skills that they're going to learn from you, and feel like that you're going to give them an honest opinion that helps them feel safe to make improvements, then you will help them overcome the obstacle of believing the data that you're presenting in your feedback sessions. So now let's talk about the second barrier, and that is relationship, and the tools that you can use to help establish a good relationship with your mentees. All right, so this is called the TORIC framework. It's an acronym for the 5 tools that I'm going to present to you. In establishing good relationships that are productive and safe, building trust, being optimistic, expressing respect, expressing intentionality, and care are all aspects of thriving relationships. I think we can relate with all 5 of these in any relationships that we have. Since trust, optimism, respect, and care are relatively self-explanatory, I'm just going to spend a few seconds on intentionality. Intentionality to me means that what we are doing, saying, and acting has a purpose for the task at hand. So if I'm helping my mentee establish SMART goals, I'm not just doing that for the sake of killing time. Intentionality means that there is purpose to everything that I do. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that, if we're establishing rapport, that, we're intentionally establishing rapport. I mean, that's happening organically, but technically it is intentional. It just means that there is purpose and there are expectations that are met within that mentoring relationship. When a mentee knows that that you care about them by having a plan and or maybe adjusting the plan with them, and that the mentee themselves are important to the feedback process and not just an object. When you're intentional about that, it makes a huge difference in how your relationship is perceived by them. So the next barrier to receiving feedback is identity. And I talked about this earlier, that the mentee's own identity can, how they view themselves or their world through their own sunglasses is a very, very, very big influence. So let's talk about how we can help our mentees establish a positive identity. So helping a mentee understand the growth mindset and um, using the growth mindset more often than the fixed mindset is a really great way to help them establish their own self identity. It does take effort, there's no question. Like I said, as a mentor myself, I spend an incredible amount of time on helping my mentees develop a growth mindset. There are strategies, published strategies that you can look up to help mentees establish a growth mindset. A lot of that is recognizing that progress is 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and then being there for your mentees every step of the way as they progress through that. But helping them realize that failure and mistakes are part of progress. We talked about giving feedback in the big sense of what this video is about, but even micro feedback is really important. Little corrections, I like to say, as someone is navigating through making mistakes and failing. For example, in my science lab, my research lab, and my basic science research lab, and even my med ed lab, students are constantly asking how they can improve on something. They're trying to establish growth mindsets to their work, and I'm just really course correcting on places where I think they can stay on the right path towards their development versus huge swings in helping in giving feedback. So just tiny little adjustments are helpful. So a lot of these things, effort strategies, proper strategies, and micro feedback can lend to a growth mindset. So we've talked about growth mindset. I don't want to negate that fixed mindsets are there. There are places when fixed mindsets are very appropriate and needed. We want our mentees, though, to establish using the fixed mindset and the growth mindset in the appropriate places. Now, this is similar to System 1 and System 2, but it's not exactly the same, because you can be in a System 1 or a System 2 mindset when you have a fixed mindset, and you can be in a System 1 or System 2 mindset when you have a growth mindset. These are really more philosophical ways about how someone views themselves. So a fixed mindset might be really important for situations in which you have to be more reactive, or you need to have established rules to be able to navigate through certain spaces. It's okay to have a fixed mindset, but we want our students to grow in their identity through the growth mindset. So just to drive home the point, I think of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset on a continuum. So here, maybe parenting is something that you need a growth mindset to be able to accomplish. Maybe there are some things at work that are within certain boundaries or rules or guidelines, and you need more of a fixed mindset. But sometimes, you might be in a research lab and you need more of a growth mindset where you're open to new ideas and you're open to exploring new things. So this is certainly a skill and an art in and of itself, but I think helping your mentees lean towards a growth mindset will help them understand how to establish their own self-identity. And that identity finding is a big part of the mentoring relationship.